What's up, guys? Captain Blade J52 here with the very first of our Star Wars What If scenarios. Now, one thing I've always loved about Star Wars is the rich history and lore that it has with it. No matter which era you go to, be it to the dawning of the Jedi, thousands of years before the films in the Old Republic era, or you go into the future, into some of the old Legends materials now, or even into the new canon with The Force Awakens, or even the original 6 films, there's always some type of adventure or something you could pick up and follow along with. Now, I always love stuff like that, especially the debates that come along with it, such as, well, what if this person from this era fought this person from this era? What would happen? And various what-if scenarios that come with that kind of thing. Now, for today's scenario, we're going to be examining what would have happened had Qui Gon survived the duel with Darth Maul on Naboo. Now, I've seen a few videos out there on this exact scenario already, but to me personally, I can't really agree with all of the outcomes that they had in their particular video, so in this instance, I figured I would take a stab at it myself and see what we could come up with and hopefully get some dialogue going with you folks as well. Now, Qui Gon was born in 92 years before the Battle of Yavin in Legends material, with his birthday being unknown in canon, but his home world being that of Coruscant. Now, with various canon and legend sources, we can infer that he was around 60 years old during Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Now, Qui Gon was also a practitioner of Form 4 Ataru lightsaber combat and a force to be reckoned with. Now, if you want to see further examples of Ataru combat, I would advise checking out Yoda's duels in Revenge of the Sith and also Attack of the Clones, because that is the form that he practiced. Now, Qui-Gon was considered a great Jedi by most, as he wouldn't hesitate in a lot of cases to discard the Jedi Code if he thought it was demanded of the situation to do what was right. Now, Qui-Gon also believed heavily in keeping one's focus on the here and now, not allowing future worries to cloud one's judgment. Now, due to this stance of letting the Force guide your actions in the here and now, he was considered a student of the living Force. Now, Qui-Gon also learned how to transcend his consciousness into the next realm and become a Force ghost from the Force priestesses, being the first Jedi to do so in many hundreds or even thousands of years. Now, in some sources it's stated he learned this from the Shaman of the Wills, but that's another story for another day that would take far too long to explain here than what I want to devote to it. Now, for our timeline, we're going to assume obviously a very major change to the end of the duel with Qui-Gon actually surviving. Now, I don't see a way he's going to get out of this unscathed, and as such, I believe that what we would see play out in the duel is Qui-Gon gets stabbed by Darth Maul, Obi-Wan goes berserk and cuts Maul in half. Of course, we find out later on through other sources Maul survived, but we're going to assume that the end of the duel changes to where Qui-Gon survives in this case long enough for Obi-Wan to get him help and ultimately survives the encounter. Now, we pick up with Palpatine in his public persona, being very glad and celebrating that Naboo is finally free. He's also celebrating his election as Supreme Chancellor, and would be very glad to hear that the two Jedi survived the encounter. Now, in his private persona as Darth Sidious in this instance, Palpatine would be absolutely livid in this case. He would be very angry because not only does he no longer have an apprentice to carry on the Sith legacy, but his apprentice failed to kill even one of the Jedi. Now, I believe ultimately the person that Palpatine would settle on once he completed his search for a new apprentice would be Asajj Ventress. Now, in the Prime timeline, we see that Ventress, through various sources, was a Sith assassin that was originally trained by Dooku and by Palpatine to essentially carry out some of the dirty work of the Sith, but was never truly a Sith herself. Now, in this instance, what I see happening differently is Ventress would be a full-fledged Sith Lord in this case, and go on to be a very big thorn in the side to the Jedi and to the Republic, and even killing a few Jedi much more so than she had done in the Prime timeline. Now, I also believe in this instance that Obi-Wan... excuse me, folks. Allergies are a little bit of a pain. But anyway, as I was saying, I believe Obi-Wan would be assigned to Anakin in this case as his master, because I believe in this instance that Qui Gon would be in no shape to train anybody, so I need to explain this a little bit. Because I believe a lot of people are going to be asking, well, why wouldn't it be Qui Gon? Now, as I just said, I believe that Qui Gon in this case would be in no shape to train anybody, especially while he's recovering from his wounds from the battle and the stab from the lightsaber. Now, I also believe in this case that it would be given to Obi-Wan in this instance because there would be no way that they could ignore his accomplishments, and there would be no way, in my opinion, that they couldn't make him a master, or to make him a knight in this case. And what makes me think they would have to give Obi-Wan his knighthood is because not only did he save his master from certain death, but he was the first Jedi in over 1,000 years to see a Sith Lord, let alone defeat one in combat. And that, in and of itself, is no small feat. And that's not something they're going to be able to ignore. Now, this also opens up some more interesting stuff as well. Because Qui-Gon doesn't die, Dooku never falls to the dark side. Now, it's hinted at in canon and legends and materials that the main reason Dooku fell to the dark side, the catalyst that pushed him over the edge, was Qui-Gon's death. Now, in Dooku's case, he was originally disillusioned with the Jedi Order, but Qui-Gon's death was the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, that pushed him over the edge. Now, since Qui-Gon lives in this case, Dooku doesn't fall to the dark side. Now, since Dooku doesn't fall to the dark side, in this instance, once Qui-Gon was in better health, I believe that Dooku would train his former apprentice along with Obi-Wan and Anakin, Obi-Wan being trained out of respect for Qui-Gon, and Anakin being trained due to the fact he's the chosen one, and Dooku would train all of them in Form 2 Makashi lightsaber combat. Now, what makes me think Dooku would do this would be out of concern for his former Padawan, and he would want them to be prepared in the event they faced a Sith Lord in the future, and also due to the Form 2 Makashi itself. Now, Form 2 Makashi lightsaber combat in that day and age was mostly considered a relic and an archaic thing from a bygone era when the Jedi and the Sith had large-scale conflicts. Now, it was considered mostly outdated because in that day and age, the most common thing that a Jedi would face would be a blaster-wielding opponent of some type. Now, as far as Form 2 Makashi itself goes, it was designed to fight against other lightsaber-wielding users, and in this instance was considered, like I said, essentially a relic in this case. But in this instance, since the Sith had returned, this would cause a new interest in Form 2 Makashi, with a lot of other Jedi seeking out Dooku and trusting him with their training, thus, in my opinion, cementing Dooku into the light by seeing that a lot of Jedi still do trust him with their lives and with their training. Now, I believe that Obi-Wan would also, in this case, seek out training in Form 3 Sarisu as well, with Anakin also completing training in Form 5 Shem-So. So they would have much greater toolkits to draw from than they did in the Prime timeline. Now, I believe that Dooku and Qui-Gon would go on to serve the Jedi Order faithfully, even into the Clone Wars, with Dooku being made a member of the Jedi Council. Now, eventually, we would come to the time when Anakin's older, he's got a lot of experience under his belt now, he's been with Obi-Wan for many years as an apprentice. Now, I believe that Anakin would ultimately start experiencing visions of his mother's death, just as he had in the Prime timeline. Now, I believe that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan would be able to sense that something is up, but wouldn't be able to know what it is until it was too late. I believe the next time they encountered Anakin, they would sense the leftover power of the dark side within him, and sense the pain within Anakin, and ultimately confront him about it. Now, I believe that they would confront Anakin about it, and he would confide in them what he did, because he sees Obi-Wan as a brother figure, and he sees Qui-Gon as that father figure in his life. Now, I believe because of the seriousness of his actions, that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon would have to take Anakin before the Council. Now, a lot of the Council would want to boot Anakin out of the Order, but Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Dooku, all three would be vouching for him, and as such, he would be kept within the Order. Now, I believe that Anakin would be given special training at this point, to account for the darkness within him under the watchful eye of Master Yoda and Master Windu to try to deal with the darkness within him. Now, what makes me think that they would give him training in this case is to prevent it from happening again, and also because Master Windu himself very regularly deals with the temptation of the dark side due to his home planet and where he's actually from. Now, I believe as well that eventually, once Anakin recovered from his mother's death and completed the special training, that he would be given Ahsoka as his apprentice, just as in the Prime timeline. Now, I believe most everything would play out similarly to how it did in the Prime timeline with the Clone Wars and everything, until the bombing of the Jedi Temple by Barriss Offee. Now, we saw in the Prime timeline that Barriss bombed the temple and tried to pin it on Ahsoka, in this case, and the Jedi essentially drummed Ahsoka out of the Order, essentially not digging deeper to discover the truth. And we saw that Anakin did everything in his power to clear his apprentice's name. Now, what I believe would change in this instance is that it would be Qui Gon that would be able to convince Ahsoka to stay within the Order. Now, I believe in this instance, what would change majorly is Anakin, at the start of everything, would be seeking out any Jedi that would help him to try to clear Ahsoka's name. And I believe it would be Qui Gon in this case that would step up to the plate and help Anakin try to clear her name. Now, Qui Gon, what makes me think he would do that in this instance is Qui Gon doesn't view everything in the strictly light versus dark sense that a lot of Jedi traditionally have. He believes that there can be some middle ground in this instance. Now, what I believe he would step in for is he would believe that Ahsoka isn't being given a fair chance to prove herself and to prove her innocence by the Jedi Council, and that they're just rushing to a quick decision. Now, because of this, I believe that Qui-Gon would ultimately help Anakin out, and together the two of them would be able to clear Ahsoka's name. Now, I had toyed with the idea of it being Dooku being the one to convince Ahsoka to stay at the end of things, because I had thought about it as Dooku being sort of a grandfather figure type in that situation to Ahsoka, because, you know, he had once considered himself leaving the Jedi Order, but ultimately decided against it. However, I decided not to go with that because I would feel that Dooku would see it as improper for him to interfere that much in a situation like that. And as such, he wouldn't be the one that ultimately convinced Ahsoka to stay, but it was an interesting little side thing that I did want to bring up here. But ultimately, I believe it would be Qui-Gon that convinces Ahsoka to stay, and because of this, this would be a huge weight lifted off of Anakin's shoulders, not having to worry as much about Ahsoka. Now, I believe eventually that Anakin would start experiencing the nightmares about Padme just as he had in the Prime timeline. Now, I believe that Ahsoka would sense the turmoil within Anakin at this point, and she would go to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan both out of concern for her master. Now, I believe that both of them, as they're hearing what Ahsoka's describing, would both just kind of look at each other suspecting the same thing. And I believe at this point that they would inform Ahsoka of what had happened years prior. Now, they would tell Ahsoka because they feel, since it is her master that's in danger in this case, they would feel she has the right to know, so that she can help him and try to keep him anchored to the light. Now, Anakin wouldn't be as far into the dark side at this point because Ahsoka stayed with the Order. And that was one of the big things that you could tell hurt Anakin very deeply before, was Ahsoka leaving. Now, in this instance, I believe that Ahsoka would be put off guard, and it would put her off that Anakin came so close to staying within the dark side forever, but ultimately it would just bolster her resolve to help him just that much more. Because you can see in various sources and everything that Ahsoka and Anakin do have a very strong master and Padawan bond with each other, and they care a lot about each other. We see in some instances that when Ahsoka is threatened or hurt, that Anakin goes absolutely ballistic and bananas and does everything that he can to protect her. Now, in this instance, what I see happening, like I was saying, is Ahsoka would do everything she could to help Anakin because she would want to spare him that pain of losing potentially somebody else, if that's what indeed was going on. Of course, we know that it is, but they wouldn't know that just yet. So she would do everything she could to help Anakin. Now, around this time as well, Anakin would get appointed to the Jedi Council, just as he was in the Prime Timeline. Now, also, just as in the Prime Timeline, he would not be granted the rank of Master. However, there would be one very vocal dissenting voice on the Council in this case, and we'll address that in just a moment. Now, we see in the movies and also the Revenge of the Sith novelization that this was considered a slap in the face by Anakin, because not only did they potentially deny him the ability to save Padme by denying him access to the restricted archives, but it was also essentially them saying they don't trust him. In his mind, he's thinking, well, I've served them faithfully all of these years, and am I not the chosen one? Do they not trust me with this? And in addition to this, the main reason Anakin wanted to be a master so badly was because he wanted access to the restricted archives. Now, within the restricted archives that only masters can access, there were a bunch of scrolls and holocrons and various things that contained lore from not just the Jedi, but also various Sith sources they had recovered as well over the years. Now, Anakin wanted access to this information to learn any possible secret, any possible power that he could use to try to save Padme's life, and the life of his children. Now, the very vocal dissenter in this case would be Count Dooku. Now, Dooku tends to think a lot like Qui Gon in this instance, and Dooku would feel that the Council is doing wrong by Anakin in this case, and would make that a very well-known opinion. Once Master Windu stated that they weren't granting him the rank of Master, I believe Dooku would speak up in this case. And he would state, Masters, or my fellow Masters of the Council, I must object to this. Is he not the chosen one that we believe him to be? Has he not served us faithfully over the years? If we do indeed trust him, then why are we not making him a Master, especially if he is the chosen one, as we believe? And he would be very vocal, and you could tell he was pretty much very pissed off in this case, because he would feel that the Council is doing wrong by Anakin in this case. Now, Master Windu would take the older Jedi's opinions to heart, and his words to heart, listening, but he would also have a rebuttal of his own. Master Windu would state something along the lines of, this appointment was not made by a member of the Jedi High Council. This was made by a politician who does not have the best interest of the Jedi at heart. If there is to be made anyone a master on this council, it must be done so by the Jedi Council ourselves, and not by an outsider. And as such, Dooku wouldn't like it, but for the time being at least, he would be outvoted, and Anakin would not be granted the rank of Master. Now, because Dooku would speak up for Anakin in this instance, this wouldn't push Anakin as far into the dark side as it had previously. So what I see happening is that because Dooku spoke up, this would show Anakin that at least some on the Council do trust him. Now, I believe that Qui-Gon would hear about this, and he would voice his objections to the Council as well at some point, because although Qui-Gon was not a member of the Council, he was a very respected master in the Order, and his word carried weight within the Jedi Order. So I believe he would speak up in this instance. However, Anakin still would not be granted the rank of Master. Now, I believe that Anakin around this time as well would discover that Palpatine is a Sith Lord, and he would turn this information over to Windu and the other Masters of the Council, just as he had in the Prime Timeline. Now, I believe in this instance, Windu and the other Masters that originally went to confront him would be essentially the same group that confronted him in Revenge of the Sith. Now, I had toyed with Dooku and perhaps even Qui-Gon going to confront Palpatine as well in this case, due to them being very powerful Jedi, and with Dooku's skill in Form 2 Makashi. Now, what made me decide against this was I felt that the Masters of the Order would fear an attack on the Temple as soon as they tried to confront Palpatine, and they would want to protect the Padawans and the younglings that are in the Temple. Now, they would want to have Masters like Dooku and Qui-Gon there to protect everybody, because even if the Jedi manage to stop the Sith, what does it really gain them if they lose the next generation of Jedi in the process? Now, I believe in this case, what would happen is that Anakin would stay in the council chambers in this case, and Ahsoka would stay with him in this case, wanting to be close to her master and to try to help him. Now, I believe she would sense that Anakin is about to break in this case, and she would alert Qui Gon. Now, once Qui Gon came into the chambers on Ahsoka's calling, in this case, she would be practically in tears at this point. Ahsoka would be out of concern for Anakin. She could sense the pain within him, and she wanted to do everything that she could to help Anakin, but he just wouldn't let her close enough to help. And that, to Ahsoka, I believe would be a very painful thing for her. Now, at this point, as she's practically begging Anakin to tell her what's wrong, she would be in tears at this point, everything, and Qui-Gon would be concerned as well, sensing the turmoil within Anakin. Now, between his crying apprentice and the person that he sees as his father figure, Anakin would finally confide in both of them what was going on. He would confide in Qui-Gon that he had married Padme, and that they were going to have children. And this would confirm Qui-Gon's long-held suspicions, and perhaps Ahsoka's as well, that something else is going on between the two of them. Now, I believe in this instance that Dooku would have had to have been alerted to the situation because of how serious it was. Now everything would click into place for them. Once they informed Dooku of what was up, it would click into place into the experienced Jedi's head. Then he would know what was going on. Now, around this time, Palpatine would call out to Anakin through the Force, with Ahsoka, Dooku, and Qui-Gon all sensing this as well. Now, Anakin at this point would decide to go to Windu's location and go to Palpatine's office where the fighting was going on. Now, I believe that as they're heading out the door, that Qui-Gon would decide to go with Anakin as well, and Dooku would choose to stay behind to guard the temple. Now, just as they're heading out the door, Dooku would stop Anakin with a hand on his shoulder, reminding him, saying, "Anakin, now we understand. I'm disappointed you didn't tell us sooner, but once you get back, I am going to personally give you access to the forbidden parts of the Jedi archives." Now, with this in his mind, Anakin would go off to confront Palpatine with Qui-Gon at his side as well. Now, as he arrives on scene, he would see Windu standing over Palpatine. Now, what I see happening next is Palpatine would start to tempt Anakin just as he had in the Prime timeline, even shooting lightning towards Windu just as he had before. At this point, Qui-Gon would draw his lightsaber himself, but wouldn't be able to get close enough to help out Master Windu at this point. Now, I believe we would see a young Ahsoka arriving just a few moments after this, seeing what was going on. Now, she would have snuck away from Dooku, wanting to help Anakin in any way that she could, and also to confront Palpatine, who's the Sith Lord. Now, at this point in time, Palpatine would be feigning weakness and everything, trying his best to tempt Anakin. Now, at this point in time, Qui-Gon and Windu as well would be trying to reason with Anakin, reminding him, he's a Sith Lord, he's an ancient enemy of the Jedi, you can't trust what he says. At this point, Ahsoka would be trying to anchor Anakin to the light as well, reminding him that he cleared her name. He fought as hard as he could to save her, and now it was their turn to help him, reminding Anakin that he's a Jedi first. And at this point, I believe it would be Qui-Gon that would remind Anakin that, Anakin, this is the man that ordered the hit on Padme. This is the one that ordered the hit on someone that you love. Now, this would pique Master Windu's interest in this case, but he wouldn't have time to think about it very much. And at this point, it would be Qui-Gon that would remind Anakin one final time, "Remember, Anakin, once we leave out of here, Master Dooku has promised you access to the restricted parts of the archive." Now, this would be something that Master Windu would echo as well. And he would say to Anakin, he would remind Anakin as well, saying, "If Master Dooku has saw fit to grant you access to the archives, Anakin, then I too will honor this deal. But now we must deal with this Sith Lord." Anakin, once all of this clicks in his head, would be very angry with Palpatine, losing any and all respect he had for him. Once Palpatine realized he failed to turn Anakin to the dark side, I believe he would lash out at Ahsoka, in this case trying to kill her with Force Lightning. Now, I believe that he would fire a quick blast of Force Lightning in Ahsoka's direction, ultimately hitting her but not outright killing her. Ahsoka, being as inexperienced as she was versus someone like Palpatine, wouldn't be prepared for it. Now, I believe this would knock Ahsoka unconscious, and at this point, an enraged Anakin would step forth with his lightsaber, and he would make a lunge for Palpatine, who would try to keep Anakin away with Force Lightning, but would ultimately fail. I believe Anakin would strike Palpatine down in this instance, thus ending the threat of Palpatine. Now, I believe that once this happened, he would immediately turn his attention to his unconscious apprentice. Master Windu would be checking her vital signs and see that she's just unconscious. At this point, Anakin would carry the unconscious Ahsoka out of the room, with Master Windu and Master Qui Gon Jinn calling for a security team and for a special session of the Senate to inform everyone what had happened. Once the Senate was informed that Palpatine was the Sith Lord and of everything that had happened, immediately everything would essentially fall apart as far as the war effort goes. The droids would be shut down once everything was discovered and everything, and the Republic ultimately would be a lot stronger due to having a standing army. At this point, they would want to have a standing army to prevent something like that from happening in the future and everything. Now, what I see happening as far as the Jedi Council goes at this point, a special session of the Council would be called at this point to deal with everything and for Anakin to finally come clean to the Council. Now, what I believe would happen is he would have Padme by his side, he would have Ahsoka with him as well, and Qui-Gon standing behind him in this instance. Now, I believe what would happen in this case is that Anakin would finally tell the Council what had happened. Master Yoda would speak up at this instance. "Disappointed we are in you, young Skywalker, that inform us of this you did not. Tell us of this, should you have. However, due to honoring the right thing you have chosen to do, honor this deal with Master Dooku we shall." And I believe at this point as well that one or two of the other Jedi Masters would ask the fair question. Why should he be allowed to stay within the Order? And I believe in this case it would actually be Obi-Wan in this instance stating, "But Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, one of our own, is he not also married?" Now, what makes me think that perhaps it could be Obi-Wan or Qui-Gon that would speak up in this is because in Legends material, we do see that Qui-Gon did have a love interest at some point in Master Tal. And we see that Obi-Wan also, at some point, had a love interest in Siri Tachi. And probably butchered those names, just throwing that out there. I'm very well aware of that. But in Legends materials, we do see that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan did, at some point, have a love interest of their own. So they would understand what Anakin was feeling. And even if you just went by the canon materials, I believe they would understand in Anakin's case. Now, I believe at this point that the Jedi Council, and this would be a very big thing, they would realize, seeing the strength that Anakin's family gives to him, seeing the strength that his love for Padme gives him, his concern for Ahsoka, and even the respect that he has for Qui-Gon, they would see the power that this gives him. And I believe at this point that the Jedi Council would finally realize that they need to do away, or at least loosen their rules on attachments, thus allowing Anakin the ability to stay married, and also allow for Jedi to explore these emotions, albeit with guidance and proper training, thus making the Jedi Order as a whole a lot stronger. I believe as well in this instance that you would see Padme would be given, or would give birth to Luke and Leia just as she had in the Prime Timeline, except this time she would survive and whatnot. Now, I also see Anakin being granted access to the restricted archives to train, just as he was promised by Dooku, and he would be kept under the watchful eye of Master Windu and Master Yoda as he continued to train and get even stronger himself, studying the restricted archives, studying anything that he could with the Masters themselves, offering any assistance as they could to Padme and also the twins who would be trained as Jedi once they're old enough. Perhaps even with Ahsoka becoming a master to Luke or Leia whenever they're older, since she would be essentially an older sister figure to them. Now, I believe as well, once the twins were born, we would see one final attempt by Ventress to kill the twins and to destroy Anakin, but this time she would be met by the finest members that the Order has to offer, with all of the Jedi Council, including Yoda, Dooku, Qui Gon, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and also Ahsoka as well. And this time, Ventress would be defeated, thus ending the threat of the Sith once and for all. Now, I do believe later on we would see Snoke come to power, but this time Snoke would be met with a much stronger Jedi Order than ever had been before. And this time around, the Republic would be a lot more prepared and everything, and would be better able to deal with the threat. But anyways, folks, that's what I see happening in this case and in this particular situation and whatnot. That's how I see everything changing. I realize this is a longer scenario and whatnot, but there's quite a bit of stuff that I saw changing in this case that would need to be explained in this instance, so I felt that it needed a little bit more time than the average scenario would and everything because of how much stuff this would change in the Prime timeline. But anyways, folks, let me know what you think about everything down below in the comment section. Do you agree with this scenario, or do you see perhaps something else differently happening? Or do you see something else happening outright? Let me know what you think down below in the comment section, what you think of this. I'd like to hear from some of you guys as well and everything. Also, let me know if there's any particular scenarios you would like to see me do from Star Wars, Star Trek, Dragon Ball Z, or even Power Rangers as we start to advance into other series for our what-if scenarios. And I may end up doing a video over your exact scenario. But for now, folks, this is Captain Blade J52 signing off, and may the Force be with you.